Jack Mason gripped the controls of his spacecraft, the Odyssey, as it shuddered violently, streaking through the alien sky. Warning alarms blared, piercing the tense silence of the cabin. The atmosphere of Zetherian, thick and swirling with electric storms, was unforgiving. "Odyssey to Earth Command, do you copy?" Jack's voice was steady despite the chaos. Static crackled over the communication system. No response. He was on his own. Another violent jolt rocked the ship, and Jack glanced at the navigational panel. "Not good," he muttered. The fuel was critically low, and the propulsion system was failing. With a deep breath, he prepared for the inevitable. The ground approached fast. Jack managed to maneuver the Odyssey towards what looked like a clearing in the dense alien forest. Trees with luminescent leaves blurred past as he wrestled with the controls, trying to soften the landing. With a deafening crash, the spacecraft hit the ground. Metal groaned, and sparks flew as Jack braced himself against the impact. Then, as quickly as the chaos had escalated, it fell silent, save for the hissing of failing systems. Jack unstrapped himself, checking for injuries. Satisfied he was mostly unscathed, he grabbed his survival pack and activated the emergency beacon, though he wasn't sure it would penetrate the planet's dense atmosphere. Exiting the wreckage, Jack surveyed his surroundings. The forest was eerily quiet, and the air was tinged with a scent he couldn't place. He checked his pack for the universal translator and clipped it to his belt, hoping he wouldn't need to use it. As he assessed the damage to the Odyssey, footsteps approached from behind. Jack spun around, hand instinctively going to the blaster at his side. "Whoa, easy there!" The figure raised his hands. A human. He was tall, with dark skin and close-cropped hair, wearing a uniform Jack didn't recognize. "I'm Commander Darius Cole. I heard your crash. Looks like you could use some help." Jack lowered his weapon, puzzled. "A human? On Zetherian? How?" Darius grinned. "Long story. I'm part of a research team. Been here 6 months studying the flora. Your arrival was, let's say, louder than anticipated." Jack chuckled, despite the situation. "I'm Jack Mason. Wasn't planning on a grand entrance. What can you tell me about this place?" Darius gestured for Jack to follow him, away from the smoking debris. "This planet is home to the Zethorans, an advanced alien civilization. They're cautious about outsiders, but you're lucky. This part of the forest is far from their main cities." As they walked, Darius shared survival tips and information about the Zethorans. Jack listened intently, his mind racing with questions about this new world and its inhabitants. "So, what's the plan now?" Darius asked as they reached a small clearing with a few makeshift shelters. Jack looked back at the smoldering remains of his spacecraft. "First, I need to contact Earth, let them know I'm alive, then figure out a way to get back home." Darius nodded. "We'll do what we can. For now, welcome to Zetherian. Let's get you settled in and then work on that signal." As the alien sun set, casting long shadows over the vibrant forest, Jack felt an unexpected sense of camaraderie with Darius. Together, they would navigate the challenges of Zetherian. In the distance, the first stars began to twinkle in the dusky sky, reminding Jack that the universe was vast, and sometimes help came from the most unexpected places. Chapter 2. First contact. Jack woke to the sound of Darius bustling around the makeshift camp they had set up in the clearing. The aroma of something cooking stirred him out of his makeshift bed. Rubbing his eyes, he sat up and looked around. Darius noticed him stirring. "Morning, or whatever constitutes morning on this planet," Darius said with a smile. "I've whipped up something edible using local ingredients. Want to give it a try?" Jack nodded, his stomach growling in response. He accepted the offered plate, sniffing cautiously at the unfamiliar food. "What is this exactly?" Darius shrugged. "Some sort of tuber mixed with leafy greens I found nearby. It's safe. My team and I have been eating this stuff for months now." As they ate, Jack listened intently while Darius described more about the planet and its alien inhabitants, their technology, and their culture. He was particularly interested in how a human had managed to not only survive, but also study on such a foreign world. "So, how do we approach them?" "The Zitherans, Jack asked, setting his plate aside. "We've established a bit of a rapport with a local community just a few kilometers from here. They're curious about us, cautious but not hostile," Darius explained. "We communicate through a translator. Mine broke last week, though, so it's been challenging." Jack tapped his own device. "Well, let's hope mine holds up." They spent the rest of the morning preparing for their journey to the Zitheran community. Jack packed his essentials, checked his translator, and ensured his communicator was secure in a waterproof bag. Around midday, they set off. The forest was dense, alive with sounds and colors that Jack had never seen on Earth. Darius led confidently, navigating through thick undergrowth and over streams glowing with bioluminescent algae. After several hours of trekking, they reached the outskirts of a Zitheran village. The architecture was unlike anything Jack had ever seen. Structures that seemed to be grown rather than built, merging seamlessly with the natural environment. "Stay close and follow my lead," Darius whispered as they approached. They were met at the village perimeter by a Zitheran guard. He was tall, his skin shimmering with a subtle iridescence under the sunlight, eyes wide and watchful. "Darius," the guard said in a clicking, melodic language, before his words were smoothly translated by Jack's device. "Who is this with you?" "This is Jack Mason. He's a new arrival, crash-landed here by accident," Darius explained, gesturing to Jack. The guard studied Jack with an intensity that made him shift uncomfortably. After a moment, the guard nodded and gestured for them to follow him. They were led through the village, and Jack observed the Zitherans they passed. Their expressions ranged from curious to wary. Children peeked from behind structures, and adults paused in their tasks to watch the strangers pass. Finally, they stopped before a larger building that seemed to serve as a meeting place. The guard spoke briefly to another Zithoran, who then turned to Jack and Darius. "I am Zilran, the leader of this community. We have been informed of your unexpected arrival, Jack Mason. What brings you to Zitharian?" His tone was formal, but not unfriendly. Jack took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "I'm here by mistake, sir. I had a malfunction with my spacecraft. No harm. I only wish to make contact with my people to arrange for rescue and to learn from you, if possible." Zilran listened, then nodded slowly. "We are a peaceful people, but cautious. You may stay with us temporarily, under observation. Darius has earned some trust among us. You will stay with him." Jack felt a wave of relief mixed with a daunting sense of what lay ahead. He nodded his thanks, aware that every step forward on this planet deepened his journey into the unknown. As they left the meeting place, Darius clapped Jack on the back. "Well done. Let's get you settled in. We've got a lot to discuss." The sun began to set, casting long shadows through the Zitheran village, and Jack felt a profound sense of being part of something much larger than himself. A small, human figure, navigating the complexities of a new world. Chapter 3. Language of Science. Jack spent the first few nights in the Zithoran village under the careful watch of the community, with Darius acting as his guide and intermediary. The mornings were filled with cautious interactions and the evenings with debriefs on what he'd learned. One morning, Darius brought another human to meet Jack, an anthropologist named Dr. Simon Hayes, who had been studying the Zitherans for over a year. Simon was lean, with a thoughtful demeanor and glasses that seemed perpetually on the verge of slipping off his nose. "Jack, this is Simon. He's going to help you understand our hosts better," Darius introduced them as they sat down outside. "Jack's temporary dwelling. Pleased to meet you, Jack. Darius tells me you've had quite the entry into our world here," Simon said, offering his hand. Jack shook it, finding comfort in the familiar gesture. "Thanks, Simon. I'm just trying to get my bearings still. Any insights?" "You have would be invaluable," Jack replied earnestly. Simon nodded, pushing his glasses up. "Well, the first thing you should know is that The Zithorans value knowledge above almost everything else. They're particularly interested in technology and biological sciences. Your background as an astronaut and engineer could be quite fascinating to them. That's good to know. I'd like to share whatever I can. Maybe find some common ground, Jack said, his mind racing with possibilities. That's the spirit, Darius chimed in. Actually, we're planning a visit to their central library and laboratory complex tomorrow. It's a bit like our research institutions back on Earth. You should come along. The next day, the trio made their way to the complex, a stunning structure resembling intertwined spirals of some tough, translucent material. The interior was even more impressive, filled with holographic displays and devices that Jack could only guess at their functions. They were greeted by a Zithoran scientist named Rilzar, who had a keen interest in interstellar technologies. His eyes lit up when he learned about Jack's engineering background. "Welcome, Jack Mason. I am Rilzar. I oversee this facility. Darius tells me you have worked on spacecraft. We are eager to learn about your methods," Rilzar said, his voice rich with excitement. Jack felt a surge of enthusiasm. "Absolutely. I'd be happy to share what I know, and I'm equally interested in your technologies." Rilzar led them through the complex, showing them various projects, from botanical studies involving alien flora to advanced propulsion experiments that made Jack's head spin. The more they talked, the more Jack realized how much the Zithorans and humans could learn from each other. At one station, Rilzar demonstrated a device that used quantum entanglement for communication. This allows us to transmit data instantaneously across vast distances, he explained. Jack was amazed. "We've theorized about this, but haven't achieved anything practical yet. This could change space travel as we know it." Simon observed the interaction with a smile. "See, it's all about the exchange of ideas. You're doing great, Jack." They spent the entire day at the complex, and as the sun began to set on Zithorian, they made their way back to the village, discussing everything they had learned. "That was incredible," Jack admitted as they walked. "I never thought I'd see anything like that. It's like they're years ahead of us in some areas, and we could really complement each other's knowledge." Darius nodded. "That's how progress is made, my friend. Through cooperation and understanding. You're bridging more than just two different worlds here." Exhausted but exhilarated, Jack realized that this unexpected detour in his journey might have landed him exactly where he was supposed to be. As the stars began to appear in the twilight sky, he felt a newfound purpose kindling within him, ready to explore the vast unknowns with his new allies. Chapter 4. The Revelation. Jack woke to the sound of murmured voices and the steady hum of machinery. He was back at the Zithoran Research Complex, seated at a long table covered with holographic readouts. Darius sat beside him, scrolling through lines of Zithoran text on a glowing panel. Across from them stood Rilzar, the lead Zithoran scientist, who was currently focused on an intricate hologram of what looked like planetary orbits. "You're saying this entire region of space is monitored?" Jack asked, rubbing his temples as he tried to absorb the information. Rilzar nodded. "Yes. We track all interstellar travel and communication traffic. However, in the past several cycles, we have noticed an unusual pattern, communications, that seem deliberately concealed." Darius leaned closer to Jack, his voice low. "That's what's been worrying us. The Zithoran leadership isn't talking about it publicly, but there are rumors that a rogue faction is involved." "What kind of faction?" Jack asked, his gaze shifting between Darius and Rilzar. Rilzar hesitated before speaking. "A group of military officers who believe Zithorian should expand its influence through more aggressive means. They see outsiders as a threat to our autonomy and have been vocal about the need for preemptive measures. Your arrival, unplanned and uncontrolled, could be the spark they've been waiting for." Darius sat back, crossing his arms. "That's why it's important we find out what's really going on. If this group's activities escalate, it could endanger the entire balance of this planet, maybe even more. Jack frowned. And you think these hidden communications are tied to them? Rilzar's luminous eyes narrowed. It is a possibility we cannot ignore. They might be coordinating something large-scale. You see, our society thrives on knowledge, on careful planning, but if this group acts outside the Council's oversight, it could lead to internal conflict. The room fell silent as Jack processed the gravity of the situation. Finally, he looked at Darius. "You've been here longer. Do you think this faction is a real threat?" Darius nodded grimly. "Yeah, I do. And I think we need to stop them before they get any stronger." Jack stood, pacing the room as he mulled over the implications. "If I help you expose them, what's the plan? I'm not exactly an insider." "That's where you're wrong," Darius said, standing as well. "You've got something they don't, an outside perspective. You've seen how these situations play out, and the fact that you're here at all makes you a wild card. They won't know how to handle you." Rilzar stepped closer. "If we can gather evidence, clear, irrefutable proof, we can present it to the Council and put a stop to their actions. But we must move carefully. The faction likely has spies even within this facility." Jack met Rilzar's gaze. "You're asking me to help expose a conspiracy on a planet I barely understand." Rilzar inclined his head. "Yes, because if we fail, the consequences could be disastrous for both Zitherans and any other species that may encounter us in the future, including your own." Jack turned to Darius. "What do you think?" Darius placed a hand on Jack's shoulder. "I think you're exactly the guy we need. You've seen what these people can do, and you're not afraid to act when it matters." Jack sighed, then nodded slowly. "All right, let's do it." Rilzar activated a new set of holograms displaying what appeared to be intercepted messages. "This is what we have so far. It's not enough to confront them, but it's a start. We need more." Jack and Darius leaned over the table, studying the data. It was clear that the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but as the three of them began forming a plan, Jack felt a growing sense of purpose. Together, they might just be able to uncover the truth. Chapter 5. Forbidden Alliance. Jack adjusted, the makeshift communicator on his belt, watching the holographic display that Rilzar had projected in front of them. The laboratory lights dimmed slightly as the image of a sleek Zitharan warship flickered into view. Beside Jack, Darius crossed his arms, his expression skeptical. "You're saying this thing isn't even supposed to exist?" Darius asked. Rilzar's glow shifted slightly, a sign of discomfort. "It was never approved by the Council. Its design is classified, yet somehow it is operational and under the control of the rogue faction." Jack leaned closer to the projection, his mind racing. "And you have no idea where it's docked? No clue who's commanding it?" "We have suspicions," Rilzar replied, his voice quiet. "But confirmation has been elusive. That's why we must act carefully." Darius nodded slowly, his gaze still fixed on the hologram. "What's the plan, then? You've got Jack and me on board, but we need more than just an idea." Rilzar turned to face them both. "There is a technician, Zalthor, who works within the faction's supply chain. He has expressed dissatisfaction with their methods. If we can convince him to help us, we might gain access to their communications network." Jack raised an eyebrow. "A discontented insider? That's a big risk." "It's our best chance," Rilzar said. "Zalthor is cautious, but he has reasons to distrust his superiors. If we approach him with the right offer, security, anonymity, and a way out, he may cooperate." Darius tapped his fingers on the edge of the table. "I know a place where we can meet him without drawing too much attention. A remote storage depot on the outskirts of the village. But we'll have to get past their surveillance. That means cutting a few lines and leaving no trace." Jack grinned. "Sounds like a job for the two of us." Rilzar's glow brightened slightly. "Then it's settled. I will prepare the encryption protocols. You two will handle the logistics. If we succeed, we'll have the proof we need to bring to the Council. The depot was silent, lit only by dim, bioluminescent strips running along the walls. Jack and Darius crouched in a shadowed corner, their breath steady as they watched for any sign of patrols. Zalthor was late. "Are you sure this guy's going to show?" Jack whispered. Darius nodded. "If he doesn't, we pack up and try another lead." But Rilzar seemed pretty sure. A moment later, the sound of light footsteps echoed through the corridor. Zalthor emerged, his expression tense, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting to be followed. He was shorter than the average Zithoran, his silvery skin slightly duller, with a wary gleam in his eyes. "You're the human?" Zalthor said, his voice clipped. Jack stepped forward, holding his hands out in a gesture of peace. "And you're the one who knows what's going on behind the scenes. We're not here to cause trouble. We're here to stop it." Zalthor hesitated, looking from Jack to Darius. "If they find out I spoke to you—" "They won't," Darius cut in. "You give us the information, and we make sure you're protected. Simple as that." Zalthor's gaze flickered back to Jack. "And why should I trust you?" Jack met his eyes evenly. "Because I've been on this planet long enough to know that whatever your faction is planning, it's not going to end well for anyone. You want to get out of their shadow? This is your chance." The Zithoran considered this, then nodded reluctantly. "There's a data terminal in their main warehouse. It's encrypted, but if you can get me access, I can show you the communications. Logs. You'll have your proof." "And you'll have a way out?" Darius asked, stepping closer. Zalthor nodded again. "If you can guarantee my safety, yes." Jack extended his hand. "Deal." Zalthor hesitated for a fraction of a second before shaking Jack's hand. "I'll give you the details, but you need to move fast. They're already suspicious." As the three of them planned their next move, Jack couldn't help but notice the faintest glimmer of trust in Zalthor's wary expression. It was a small step, but one that brought them closer to exposing the truth. Chapter 6. Gathering Allies. Quiet hum of the Zithoran communication chamber surrounded Jack, Darius, and Zalthor. The room was dimly lit by blue and green bioluminescent panels that flickered as data streams flowed across them. Jack stared at the holographic interface Zalthor had just activated. On the display, encrypted messages scrolled rapidly, their meaning obscured by complex layers of coding. "I can decrypt it, but it'll take time," Zalthor muttered, his hands gliding over the interface. "This is high-level security. The faction's leader, General Katir, isn't taking any chances." "How long are we talking?" Darius asked, pacing behind them. "If they find out we're in here, we're done." Zalthor frowned. "Maybe?" "An hour, maybe 2. I need to make sure it's clean, or they'll trace it back to me." Jack glanced at Darius. "We can hold out. Let's see what you can find." As Zalthor worked, Darius turned to Jack. "So, what's the plan once we get the evidence? We can't exactly stroll into the council and say, 'Hey, look what we found.' They'll want verification." Jack rubbed his chin deep in thought. "We need a credible voice, someone respected but not tied to the faction." "What about Rilzar?" Darius nodded. "He's been loyal to the council for years. If he presents the data, they'll listen. But we need to keep him in the loop." Jack tapped his communicator. "I'll reach out. Keep an eye on things here." Stepping into the corridor, Jack initiated the secure channel Rilzar had set up. After a brief delay, the scientist's calm, glowing visage appeared on the small screen. "Jack, any progress?" Rilzar asked. "We've got Zalthor decrypting some key communications," Jack replied. "But once we have the data, we need you to present it to the council. You're the only one they'll trust." Rilzar's eyes narrowed slightly. "I'll do it, but I must be sure the information is genuine and untainted. When can I expect the files?" "Soon," Jack said. "I'll let you know as soon as we have it." Rilzar nodded. "Very well. Be cautious. If the faction suspects us, they won't hesitate to silence their opposition." Jack ended the call and rejoined Darius and Zalthor. "Rilzar's on board. We just need that data." Good timing, Zalthor said, his tone tense. I've cracked the first layer. Give me a few more minutes. Jack and Darius stood on either side of Zalthor, watching the holographic display change. A new set of files appeared, logs of troop movements, supply transfers, and encrypted orders. Jack's stomach tightened as he recognized the scale of the operation. They're stockpiling weapons, Darius said, his voice grim. More than enough to overthrow the council if they wanted. Not just weapons, Zalthor added, scrolling further. They're making deals with off-world smugglers, unregistered starships. This isn't just a power grab, it's a full-scale coup. Jack Boy exchanged a look with Darius. We need to move fast. As Zalthor finished the decryption, he transferred the files to a secure drive and handed it to Jack. This is everything. You'll need to get it to Rilzar immediately. Darius nodded. Let's go. They exited the chamber and made their way through the quiet corridors of the complex. The air felt heavier, each step echoing with the weight of what they'd uncovered. They knew that at any moment the faction could discover their actions and turn on them. When they reached the rendezvous point outside, Jack took a deep breath. Zalthor, are you sure you'll be safe? The Zitharan technician hesitated, then nodded. I'll handle it. Just make sure this gets to the council. Jack clasped Zalthor's shoulder briefly. Thank you. With that, Jack and Darius set off into the night, the data drive secure in Jack's pack. The forest around them was alive with faint bioluminescent glimmers, but their minds were focused on the task ahead. They had the evidence, a trusted ally in Rilzar, and a dangerous road ahead. The next step was crucial, delivering the proof, and convincing the council to take action before it was too late. Chapter 7. A night of stars, the three of them sat quietly around the small makeshift fire, the sky above them sprawling with constellations that looked nothing like those on Earth. The forest around them was still, save for the occasional flutter of a winged creature or the soft rustle of the glowing leaves. Jack glanced at Darius, and Zalthor, the tension of the past days beginning to ebb away under the starlit canopy. It's strange, Darius said, breaking the silence. I've been here for over 6 months, and I've never really stopped to look up at the sky like this. Jack stretched his legs out, leaning back on his elbows. Guess I never had the chance before. Feels like everything's been nonstop since I landed. Zalthor, sitting a bit apart, tilted his head toward the stars. Zetharian's people have always looked up. We charted these stars long before we understood their true nature. Before we left our planet's surface, we saw them as guides, as constants. Jack turned his gaze upward, letting Zalthor's words sink in. He couldn't help but think of the skies back home, the countless nights he had spent staring at the stars, dreaming of exploration and discovery. Here, under this alien sky, it felt like those dreams had taken on a new, unexpected shape. You know, Darius said, his voice low, when I signed up for this research mission, I thought it'd be months of writing reports, collecting plant samples, maybe sending back the occasional transmission. I never imagined I'd be sitting here with another human and a Zitharan, working to uncover a conspiracy. Jack chuckled softly. Life has a way of surprising you. Zalthor glanced at them, his iridescent skin catching the firelight. It's not only life, it's choices. You chose to act when others would have walked away. That is something we Zitharans respect deeply. Jack gave a small smile. I think that's something we have in common, then. Darius leaned forward, poking the fire with a stick. Tomorrow we hand off the data to Rilzar, but after that, do you think the Council will actually move on this? I mean, we've got evidence, sure, but we're outsiders, at least Jack and I are. Zalthor looked thoughtful. If the evidence is as solid as it appears, the Council will have no choice. General Katir's plans endanger everyone, not just outsiders. The Zitharan Council has always valued stability, and this information will prove that the faction's actions are a direct threat. Jack leaned back again, his eyes tracing the unfamiliar constellations. I guess it all comes down to what they value more, stability or tradition. From what I've seen, this planet's people have a lot going for them. I just hope they're willing to protect it." Darius raised an eyebrow. "You really think they'll listen to us, to Rilzar?" Jack nodded slowly. "I do. They may be cautious, but they're not blind. They'll see what's right in front of them." The fire crackled softly, and for a moment no one spoke. The three men sat together under the vast expanse of alien stars, bound not by blood or history, but by a shared mission and the hope of averting disaster. Chapter 8. Dawn of Understanding. Jack stood at the edge of the council chamber, his hands gripping the data drive tightly. The chamber was vast and semicircular, its walls glowing with softly pulsing panels that displayed Zythoran records and historical symbols. The air felt heavy, not with temperature, but with the weight of the moment. Darius stood at his side, arms crossed, his face set in a determined scowl. "Ready for this?" Jack gave a single nod. "As ready as I'll ever be." The chamber filled gradually with council members, tall, elegant Zythorans whose shimmering skin reflected the light. They moved silently to their seats, their expressions unreadable. Jack couldn't help but feel out of place in his Earth-made jacket and boots, but there was no turning back. Rilzar approached from the opposite side of the room, flanked by two council guards. His normally calm demeanor now carried an air of urgency. When he reached Jack and Darius, he whispered quickly, "The council is wary. Present the data clearly. Make no assumptions about their reactions." Jack nodded again, tightening his grip on the drive. Together they moved to the center of the chamber. All eyes were on them now, alien, bright, unblinking. One of the council members, a figure named Erelthar, leaned forward. "Rilzar, you have brought outsiders into our most sacred chamber. Explain." Rilzar's voice was steady. "Esteemed council members, I have uncovered evidence that warrants immediate attention. These outsiders were instrumental in gathering." Erelthar's gaze shifted to Jack. "Human, speak. What have you brought us?" Jack stepped forward, carefully placing the data drive on the central projection table. With a nod from Rilzar, he pressed the activation panel. The chamber dimmed, and the air above the table filled with holographic streams, encrypted communications, troop movements, lists of unauthorized weapon shipments. "This is what the faction under General Katir has been planning," Jack began, his voice steady. "They're stockpiling weapons, moving troops without your knowledge, and making deals with off-world smugglers. This isn't just a small splinter group. They're preparing for a coup." A murmur rippled through the council members. Some exchanged glances. Others remained still, their expressions unreadable. Erelthar's glowing eyes narrowed. "And how did you acquire this information?" Rilzar stepped in. "I worked with these individuals to uncover what would have otherwise remained hidden. Zalthor, a technician within the faction's network, provided access. This data is unaltered. It is the truth." Another council member, a female Zitharan named Lithena, spoke up. "This is a grave accusation. If this data is accurate, it threatens not only our governance, but the safety of Zitharian itself." Darius took a step forward, his voice strong. "We're not here to sow discord. We're here because we believe your planet deserves better than to be taken over by extremists. You've got the proof now. It's up to you to act on it." The council sat in silence for what felt like an eternity. Jack could feel his pulse pounding in his ears. Finally, Erelthar spoke again. "Rilzar, you have long been a voice of reason among our people. If you vouch for the authenticity of this data, then we must take it seriously." Rilzar bowed his head slightly. "I do." Erelthar turned to the other council members. "We must convene privately to determine our next course of action. For now, these individuals are to remain under our protection. Guards, ensure their safety." As the council members began to file out, Jack exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Darius clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Not bad, Mason, not bad." Rilzar remained calm, though Jack thought he saw a faint glimmer of satisfaction in the scientist's glowing eyes. "You've done your part. Now it is up to the council." Jack nodded, his voice low. "Let's hope they make the right choice." The three of them stepped out into the cool Zetherian air, the weight of their efforts finally settling in. The dawn had begun to break, casting the sky in hues of purple and gold. It wasn't a victory yet, but it felt like the start of something new. Together they walked back to the village, leaving the council to decide the fate of their planet.